What's up, guys? It's Ron from Ron Rody Law, and in this video we're going to talk about what it takes to do real estate full-time for your income. Now, I get this question a lot, and a lot of people, maybe you hate your job, maybe you love real estate, but you want to do real estate full-time for your income, for your job. And I get it. It's very attractive. It sounds appealing. But in this video, as a commercial real estate lawyer, I know thousands of investors, and I would say a good chunk of my clients, maybe 35%, 40%, do real estate full-time. Now, what does that mean? We'll get into that in the rest of the video, but I think I'm best positioned to kind of advise you on the lifestyle, the types of properties, the workload, and some of the key stressors that you need to evaluate if real estate full-time is for you. Ron from Ron Rody Law, and I'm a commercial real estate attorney based in Dallas. We have a small firm here that does work nationwide. If you're buying or selling commercial real estate, we can help you. We do triple net leasing as well as truck parking. That's my personal investment. I have tons of money in industrial outdoor storage and managed truck parking. Okay. Now that I've got that out of the way, let's talk about investing in real estate full-time, because let's try to define it, okay? What I mean by real estate full-time is that you don't have a W-2 job that takes 40 hours a week, or something where you're not on call to be in the email response mode 9 to 5 p.m., okay? And I use that definition a little bit loosely because there are still a lot of positions. If you're in the tech world, if you're in contracting or consulting, you're able to do side jobs, and you may even get a W-2, but you're not in the office, you're 100% remote, and your job description is not one that you have to be immediately available. And what I mean by that is you have projects, you have meetings, but they're set in advance and you're not necessarily immediately available. These people still have income, but when you think about what they do every day, first thing on Monday morning, if they're doing real estate, that's their job. And so I want to first define it that way because a lot of people don't need to get rid of a W-2 or a job completely. What they need to do is just shift that type of job responsibilities, probably for a reduction in income, but you get to potentially keep health insurance, you keep your 401k, you keep some other perks, you get a company credit card or a company laptop. But when you wake up on Monday morning, the first thing on your mind is, what do I need to do for my real estate investments? You're doing real estate full-time. Okay, and beyond that, I define real estate full-time as you're generating consistent income. It is going to be difficult, or it's a different conversation if you're a developer and if you're doing large projects with zero cash flow, and in fact you have negative cash flow for a period of 2 to 3 years, and then you exit and you make $2 million on a deal. That is okay, but that type of very uneven cash flow is hard, or it's harder for people to transition if they haven't done deals like that before. Now with that out of the way, let's focus on the type of investor that I have that is able to transition from a W-2 job where they're in tech and they're a software engineer, and now they want to do real estate full-time. They need to be buying cash flowing assets. And what I mean is they need cash flow on day one, they need a predictable occupancy, they need a predictable debt service, and that bottom line distribution, let's say their property is throwing off $100,000 of cash on cash after debt service, after property taxes, everything, and it's throwing off $100,000, and you personally are taking 80% of that, maybe 50% of that, and you're able to spend that money on your day-to-day living expenses. Now, in my example, 50 or 80 grand of 100 is not a lot. For a lot of people watching this, you might say, Ron, I make 200 grand a year. How am I going to replace my income off of 50? And I agree, that's a tough question solely based on income. And the other way to generate income from real estate full-time is through fees. And there are acquisition fees, there's management fees, there's AUM, there's property management fees. But if you're able to put a deal together and raise money, this is kind of the last 5 years in the multifamily and self-storage space where all these syndicators were doing real estate full-time, but they were relying on 200 grand worth of fees from a closing. And that is where you get in trouble. And I want to caution people not to rely on fee income because it forces you to do deals. And you have to do a transaction. You have to raise money. You have to close to pay yourself. And if you need that fee income to survive, to pay your mortgage, to pay your kids' braces, to put food on the table, it's going to put you in a tough position if you have a down year. If revenue is down, if net income is down, you're going to be pressured to do these deals. And that's why I want to advise you don't want to jump out of one W-2 where you're not happy into a more stressful position where you don't have income, or even if you have to dip into savings. That's not a great situation. Let's talk about something that people don't always discuss, which is reducing your expenses. The ability to do real estate full-time is just a simple equation, right? Your revenue, your personal revenue, has to be greater than your expenses. And a lot of people focus on replacing their W-2 income of $200,000 a year. However, not a lot of attention is spent on reducing your expenses, and that is just as powerful. A dollar saved off of your personal expenses is equal to about 1.2, 1.3 dollars of revenue because of tax, right? That's your after-tax expenses. So it's very powerful that I would rather cut $10 of expenses than adding $10 of revenue because of the tax impact. So figuring out what is your absolute lowest personal expense, this is your monthly burn, your annual burn, that is a very, very powerful way to figure out what is your minimum nut. You know, we call that, you have to meet your nut to meet your expenses, your utility bills, your property taxes, your car payment, whatever. And lowering that number is drastically faster or more impactful on getting to doing full-time real estate. I have, my intern is in the background here. What questions do you have, Diana, for somebody considering this type of transition?
Well, I was just wondering how can you prevent not the flow of an unsteady income? How can you prevent that?
That's right. So she asked basically, how do you prevent the uneven cash flow? And the short answer is you can't. Real estate is just like a business. It is predictable, but you can't guarantee it. And so the best way that I approach it is to kind of break things up into probability of outcomes. All right, so to expand a little bit on this concept of probability, this is what I think helps investors sleep at night. And so what we have is 100%, and realistically, we can really only estimate probably 99% of the outcomes, okay? I don't want to consider black swan events. I don't want to talk about prepper apocalypse, although I love that stuff too. I do think about it, but that's not the purposes of this video. What we have is a range of outcomes. And on the high side, this is best, and then this is the worst. And what you need to do is start breaking this into segments. I think this is probably 10% likely. We have a high side of 20% good outcome. We've got another, so how am I doing on the math here? A 40, 50. And on the low side, I will allow for a little bit more nuance to be conservative. So we'll do another 20, and then this is 60, 70, and so this is a 29% outcome. I think this is very conservative, but the idea here is to let you sleep at night to where even, you know, on this low end here, maybe this trickles down to, okay, so this was a theoretical investment throwing off 100K. After debt service, maybe you buy it free and clear. After all expenses, a little bit of capital reserves, 100K. So off 100K, your best case scenario is that you receive 110, right? You have a 10% chance of receiving that overage. You have a 20% chance of probably just hitting what you expect. Here you have probably 80. Here you have 60. And somewhere in here, I'm going to go down into 50,000 and maybe 25,000. I mean, this is a pretty bad scenario off of a expected 100K distribution. But the point is to analyze these outcomes, and so that you don't need this 100, you don't need 80. While I think it's likely, your expected value is still about 100. Maybe even this expected value would be lower. You know, you'd probably be at $65,000, $63,000. The point is not to just rely on the median of expected value, but let's live in this world. Let's live down here where this income is enough. And you do this by looking at your personal expenses, having the ability to modulate your property level expenses. Like I mentioned before, you could be mowing the lawn yourself. If you can pick up some of these tasks, you can sleep at night being a full-time real estate investor because you know, even in the worst outcomes, you're covered. And you need your income to be enough on this bad case scenario. But you need to do this chart and you need to graph out what type of income you need, because if you only need $60,000 or $50,000 to live, this single investment is not enough to do real estate full time, but 2 of these investments is. And that's the best you can do. The best you can do is account for a 90% of the possible outcomes, maybe 85%. And it's up to you on your individual risk taking. If you've got kids, if you have a spouse, maybe you have a significant other that works and they work a regular job. But if your expenses are very firm and they're contractual obligations, for example, car payment, insurance, you don't have a lot of flexibility to reduce those. However, if your budget is mostly spent on beer and discretionary travel, well, you could probably cut that Thanksgiving trip to Bali if you needed to save money. And so I think that's the way you mitigate it. And with real estate, it's a business, there are no guarantees. But I think W-2 has an illusion of security as well. There is no guarantee that you will have your job at the end of the year in the next 11 months. But people think it's a little bit more secure just because they don't have to think about the revenue and expense side. But great question. And as you grow your portfolio and as you increase your income, you're able to expand the range of outcomes to 99%. So you say, even if 2 of my properties go cash flow neutral or cash flow negative, I still have enough for my personal expenses. And this is the calculation that you have to do before you pull the trigger and you quit your W-2. I fully believe you can do it. If you're watching this video, you can make these choices, but don't be misled of thinking that you have to replace 100% of your current income.
Is there an asset class that's better for full-time real estate?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For me, I've seen more people that are able to transition to some of the quasi businesses. So like things like self-storage, things like multifamily and laundromats and car washes, because there is a little bit more of a management expense. And in my scenario where the cost of the revenue is coming down and expenses are coming up, you can make decisions to fire people or cut off different expenses and then self-perform those tasks, and that will save you money and you're able to make more money, but it's not a most efficient use of your time. So again, laundromat, you have this marketing component, you maybe are cleaning the parking lot. I've seen more people take that baby step transition to where if the economy is really bad, I'm gonna fire my lawn guys and I'm gonna mow the lawn on my property myself. It's not great, it's not permanent, but until the economy comes back and you have enough free cash flow, those are the properties that do best where you can make an impact. The ones that don't do as well are freestanding retail triple net properties. Like when you go buy an Arby's and they're on an absolute net lease, there's absolutely not much you can do to encourage them to pay their rent. They're either gonna pay their rent on time every month or they don't. And there's not a lot of variance throughout the year, even if you see their sales are slipping, even if you see them struggling. Not a whole lot you can do except start looking for another tenant, but that doesn't produce cash flow in the interim or save expenses either.
What do you think about buying commercial real estate, but on like the fast food side, like let's say like a Chick-fil-A, something like that?
Yeah, I think those are great income replacement properties, but what you have to understand is that can't be your only income source. She gave the example of a Chick-fil-A, great asset, I would love to buy one if I could as a landlord. And their income, if let's say they have a net income of $245,000 a year and you're trying to replace your $300,000 a year income, you would look at that and be like, Ron, I'm gonna get $250 from this, great. I would count on it, but I don't think it can be alone. It has to be something that you could switch off and not do a percentage decrease, because there's almost no scenario where you're gonna collect 70% of the 245. It's either all or nothing. And so you as a lifestyle, as a person, have to say, Ron, I'm trying to cover my personal expenses of $100,000. I have this Chick-fil-A at 245, but I also have these 2 other multifamilies at $1,000 a piece. So that if that single tenant retail fast food place went dark, you would still have enough income to support your monthly expenses? Great question. And again, I think you can do it on that triple net side. Single tenant, there's more risk, but it's a lot easier. It's a lot more passive to manage. You just have to be able to turn that off and still be okay.
And when you get to the high peak of all of the buying the real estate, what do you do after that?
You live your life. I think switching to real estate full time is inherently more fun than almost everybody's job out there. And that's why you're watching this video, is because you think real estate is fun. It's enjoyable. Once you've achieved that kind of financial independence, and let's talk a little bit about FIRE. If any of my fat FIRE people out there, I love it. I'm not really a retire early person, but I am a financially independent. And I love being able to look at one or two of my properties and say, hey, if everything else went away, I could just live off of this income. Hey, if this went away, I could live off. And instead, I have multiple properties that contribute enough money to make a meaningful impact on my family's expenses. But what you do with your time is whatever you want. And that's the freedom that real estate, because even the most management intensive businesses do not require 40 hours a week. I mean, I can't think of anything that would require 40 hours a week. That's not development. That's not renovations or heavy construction. So I'm not talking about that. But if you're buying an existing cash flowing asset, a couple hours a week at the most. Typically, it should be a couple hours a month. So you do whatever you want. You look for more deals. You talk to more investors. You raise more money. Whatever you want to do, you're going to have that freedom. So, all right. Well, thanks to Diana for watching in and asking some questions. Ron from Ron Rody Law. If you're looking for a lawyer, if you're looking to invest in truck parking, check the links down below. Otherwise, smash that like button, and we'll see you next time.